This email's from Frank. Here's what Frank writes. I'm a Vietnam veteran from Clarksburg, West Virginia, and my story happened in Gandy, West Virginia. I come from a family that taught you to hunt at a very early age. Hunting was one of the main sources of food for most families in those days. I spent most of my childhood running through the woods for fun. I helped start a Boy Scout troop in my area. During the campouts, the boys and scoutmasters would play tag. It could get pretty brutal with the adults and the older boys giving out Charlie horses and shoulder punches when they tagged you. So a friend and I decided to escape and go into the woods. We climbed a big rock formation and we hid out. The rock formation was pretty high up and we could see the camp, while the others had no clue where we were. In the darkness behind me, I thought I heard heavy breathing and the sound of something walking toward us. I counted off the seconds between each step, and I could tell that not only was it large in size, but likely something standing upright. I thought maybe it was a bear. We never saw whatever it was because it freaked us out. We got out of there and preferring to face off with our scoutmasters than whatever was lingering out there in the dark. As an adult, I've been back there several times to trout fish. There's an awesome stream that runs through the area, and a lot of scouts from those days remain fishing buddies. But in Gandy, every time I've been there, no matter how many friends and family tag along, I always get that feeling that I'm being watched. In 1980, my ex-wife's grandfather, Bill, and his son, Johnny, asked if I wanted to go fishing in Gandy. Well, I didn't have to work, and it was going to be a beautiful weekend, so naturally I was all in. The place was packed with people, so we struggled to find a decent spot to camp. We decided on a small valley nestled between two mountains. The place was a little grown up with tall grass and strewn with fallen trees. You could tell it wasn't used often. It had a creepy feeling about it, the way it was lit up in the moonlight that night, but it had firewood and a huge fire pit. The stream wasn't but 100 yards behind our camp. The dirt road we drove in on was about 30 yards from the tent, and we had just fixed a little something to eat right before Bill and Johnny turned in for the night. I started putting a few pieces of wood on the fire when out came this cry from beyond hell. It sounded like a woman being murdered and then morphed into a lion growling and howling. I heard Bill yell from inside the tent, "What was that?" This huge hickory tree, at least 4 feet in diameter and 150 feet tall, started swaying back and forth like something had gripped the trunk and was trying to shake apples down from a branch. It was across the road, 40 feet deep into the woods, just out of the reach of my flashlight beam. Bill claimed the only thing that could shake a tree like that was a bull elephant. He needlessly added that we didn't have any animals like that in West Virginia. The campfire, by now, was a raging inferno, because while all this was going on, I was throwing any kind of wood I could get my hands on to make sure that fire stayed nuclear. We didn't have any weapons on us. Bill and Johnny never came out of that tent while I stood guard outside all night long. Finally, when daylight came, the danger seemed to have passed, and I went over to see if there were tracks near the tree. The bark, about 15 feet from the ground, was all ripped off with claw marks about 1.5 inches deep into the tree. I placed my hand over them and I couldn't open my fingers that far apart. There wasn't a track to be seen. We ate breakfast and I went fishing, and when I came back into camp around noon, Bill had everything packed up and he was itching to leave. Back then I had never heard of Bigfoot or the Patterson-Gimlin film, but it hit me about 2 weeks later when Bill was watching a Bigfoot documentary, and in the soundtrack I heard the same sort of noises similar to that we heard in Gandy. Now I know a cat or a bear couldn't make those sounds or do that kind of damage to a massive old hickory tree. I don't know the name of the writer, but here is their story. When I was 5 years old, my brother and I would stay with my grandmother during the summer in Hot Springs, Arkansas. I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. This event happened when I was 4 years old in 1979. I'm 45 years old now, and people might say this event was a child's imagination, but I know what I saw was real, and to this day, I still believe it was real. Every time this occurred, it was well past midnight when everyone was sleeping, including me. The first time, it was as if I felt something watching me and my brain woke me up. The second time this happened, I was convinced it was waking me up with telepathy. And I can't be sure why I woke up, but that's how it felt. In the middle of the night, I would wake up and look out the front door. I know I didn't wake up because of any noise, and there was no reason for me to wake up, which is why I mentioned telepathy. Every time I woke up, I always looked straight at the door. The door had 3 little windows in it. I never saw a face, but it had long, silky hair covering it. It reminded me of Cousin It. The hair was light-colored and it never moved. The first time I stared at this thing for almost a minute, and then I ran to my grandmother's room and told her that something was watching me at the door. I don't know how long the time was between those occurrences, but the second time it happened, I felt myself waking up, and before I opened my eyes this time, I knew it was happening again. As I opened my eyes, there it was. I looked again for a few moments and ran to my grandmother and told her that the thing was back looking at me. I know my grandparents never went to investigate because they thought it was my imagination. On the third occurrence, I did not spend time looking at it. As soon as I saw it, I just booked it to Grandma's room. After some time, Grandpa replaced the door with one without little windows. Well, I was happy about that, but there was a window right behind the pull-out couch. That made me more afraid because in my mind, that thing would now be directly behind me and closer to me. However, it never happened again. It was only those 3 times. The years went by and I have listened to other people's stories, but none ever described a Bigfoot that looked like mine. My grandmother told me that because my dad lived in the area, it might have been him. I knew it wasn't him, but I asked him anyway. He told me that he would never scare me like that. I then knew for sure that it wasn't him. After reading one person's account, she justified my story by saying Bigfoot tends to walk around the house at night and look in the windows. Well, I shared that with my husband and I said, see, not everyone believes in Bigfoot, but he believes that I believe. I've always wanted to share my story with the Bigfoot community, but none ever felt right. Until today when I stumbled across your YouTube channel. I may not have submitted my story if it wasn't for the fact of how the man described how Bigfoot looked. The way he described the hair was the closest anyone has come to my own story, and it was said in Arkansas. It was the story of the 8-year-old boy whose dad worked at night, and after dinner he went outside to sit on the porch while his mom and sister were inside doing the dishes. And by the light of the kitchen window, he saw a frog and looked up to see Bigfoot at the fence line. His sister came out, and then his mom pulled him back in the house. So, there you have it. That's my story, and I have never told anyone outside my family. I feel good about sharing it with you, and I would be happy if you can let me know what you think about it. My name is Holly, and I now live in Michigan, which has a ton of Bigfoot stories all its own. Have a great day, and let me know what you think. Holly, I think this story was really good, and I believe that you believe, and I believe that you know what you saw, and I really appreciate you sending this story. I got this story a long time ago, and I'm just now getting around to it, but Holly, thank you for sending it. I appreciate it.